For Sunday, August 20th, you found the Georgia gang. Topping our agenda today, Stacey Abrams makes a choice in the race for governor. It could be called Sand Mountain. And the Mercedes-Benz Stadium is almost ready to open in Atlanta. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us on this Sunday. We're going to change the order of things a little bit. If you're looking for news about Charlottesville, Nazis, white supremacists, Antifa, we're going to leave that to the network broadcast because Chris Wallace and Fox News Sunday come right behind us. We're also going to leave the eclipse alone because no matter how much you care about it, we can't show it. So good luck tomorrow watching the eclipse, everyone, and be sure to wear your glasses. Locally, a strange confluence of events. Stacey Abrams, who many would say was the front runner for the Democratic nomination for governor, got into two kind of spats in the last week, Jeff. One, she was accused of shutting up, her people were accused of shutting up her opponent, Stacey Evans, at that leftist convocation last weekend. And then Stacey Abrams seemed to double down by saying that it's time to take the carvings off Stone Mountain, sandblast the mountain. To me, that's a dead loser in a general election, no matter how much it helps her in a primary.
I don't know that it necessarily helps her in a primary. I think that it was a political, I think they both were political miscalculations on her part. I know there are emotions raging. I know you want to leave this topic, but there are emotions raging around, you know, Confederate symbolism and certainly Confederate symbolism here. But it's important to remember that she was part of a compromise when there was conversation and people came to her and said, let's do something about Stone Mountain. She said, well, we're working on this Martin Luther King statue. Abrams. That's exactly right. She said, we're working on this Martin Luther King statue. Let's get that done. Now that's done, and her tune has changed. And the other thing about that, of course, is, you know, there's an awful lot of African Americans, and Stacey Abrams should know this because she lives in DeKalb County, who have come to terms with Stone Mountain, consider it their park, go out there and essentially thumb their noses at the dead white folks on the mountain and enjoy the natural beauty of the park. Right now, as we speak, if you were to go to Stone Mountain, you would see one of the most diverse crowds of people walking up the mountain that you'll see anywhere in the southeastern United States.
Well, of course,
and it's that way every weekend.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because from my perspective, it's just a piece of history. Let's leave it alone. Alexis, what do you think? And first of all, let's go back to last Saturday, where the two candidates, remember now, we're going to get real confused about this in the next year.
Stacey and Stacey.
Stacey. But Stacey Evans was attempting to speak to the netroots, the far-left wackos of the Democratic Party. And Stacey Abrams' people, identified as such, carried signs promoting the virtues of women candidates and
black women.
And black women, exactly. While white Stacey Evans tried to speak and was interrupted. Is that the way we want our politics to be?
Well, that's the way our politics is, regardless of where we want it to be. But I do think it was unfortunate that it happened. But you cannot control your crowd, you know, so your supporters. It was too bad for Stacey Evans that it happened, but it did. But I also think that Stacey Abrams is capitalizing on the fact that she is a black woman, and the black women make up the majority of the Democratic Party in terms of voters.
Well, I agree with you, and I've heard Nan Orrock and others provide that kind of a defense that, you know, Stacey Abrams can't control her supporters to an extent that you can. I remember when Senator McCain, when someone tried to call Barack Obama a Muslim, he said, no, he's a good man, and he's a family man, and he's
that was at his rally.
It was at his rally, but she can come back publicly after the fact and say, I don't support those kinds of political antics, and I didn't hear that.
Instead, she doubled down. Now, Phil, put the politics in place here. Again, primary election, you want to go to the left. General election, you want to go more to the center. she's done the worst of both, in my view.
Well, Stacey Abrams, I agree with Jeff. She made two serious miscalculations. One involves free speech, as we've been talking about. And yes, you can condemn, even if you weren't there, and you can still condemn what happened, the shutting down, the shouting down. Stacey Evans, I don't agree with her politically, but she has a lot to offer as a Democrat candidate. She's thoughtful, and there ought to be a civil discussion, and we all ought to support it. But the politics of this is very interesting. In the Democratic Party, I think you have to be very careful when you move to the left, because as we all know, just like in the Republican Party, if you move too far to the right, you got to be careful of the centrists. The centrists in this state decide who is going to be elected to high public office. And so whether you're in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, it's a coalition. In this case, I agree, Stacey Abrams has come across as a radical when it comes to free speech and on Stone Mountain. I thought Jeff made a good argument. Stone Mountain is a part of our cultural history. Andy Young, the respected civil rights icon, says, you know what, we don't want to refight the Civil War. It's a mistake to talk about removing
we don't want to refight the Civil War,
symbols.
but we do need to revisit the statute
so you
that
think
controls
Andy Young
Stone
is sold
Mountain.
out?
I don't think Andy Young is sold out. I think we need to revisit the statute that controls that park, that says it's a celebration of the Confederacy. It's an honorific thing, and that's why they would not put the Martin Luther King
if you want to change state law through a democratic process,
well, that's what they need to do.
But you don't egg on these left-wing radicals that toppled the statue and Piedmont Park, and you don't call for sandblasting the mountain. It's part of our culture and history.
Well, it's part of politics too.
And it is
Jeff,
part of politics, and I think that part of this is that we're using race and we're using these points of division, right? These signs that say elect black women or whatever the sign said, or sandblast Stone Mountain. It's not all that different from the president getting out there and using race as a divisive tool over what happened in Charlottesville. It's all the same thing, and it needs to stop on both sides. It needs to stop. I agree with you to the extent that, yeah, the centrists ought to be winning elections, but if we keep doing these things on the extremes, trying to gin up votes and win primaries, you know, I think both folks are going to be in trouble.
I'll partially agree with you, but I think when it comes to free speech and shouting down people, I think all four of us ought to be condemning that, and Stacey Evans had no right to have her speech interrupted by these radicals.
And I want to come back and get out of the segment because I'd planned to mention it specifically. Phil, you alluded to it, Andy Young. Jeff, you and I have 40 or more years of history with Andy Young. And I've always found that in my experience with him is sometimes he drove me crazy, but on big issues, he's always been the voice of reason. So there he is at an endorsement deal for Caesar Mitchell, and he turned this argument completely around, making the point that you can't refight the Civil War, and that the Democrats, because of their own internal fighting over issues like this, lost the chance to stay in office.
Yeah,
and he mentioned the outer perimeter, and he mentioned
all the good things that could have happened if the Democrats stayed in office.
If Roy Barnes had stayed in office, yeah.
I have the greatest respect for Andy Young, and he has been instrumental at Stone Mountain Park and others in trying to calm down some of the emotions and some of the tensions. But I'd have to disagree with any notion that if it hadn't been for removal of the state flag, that we'd have Medicaid expansion in Georgia. I just don't believe that to be true. I think that the state was trending Republican, would have trended Republican no matter what was flying on top of the state capitol.
I agree with that.
But and I also think it still comes back to the legislature, that somebody needs to have the moral courage in the legislature to change that law to eliminate it as a celebration of the Confederacy.
Let's have a conversation on that, because what do you mean by that? Are you for destroying all of these monuments?
I'm saying expanding the concept of the park, so that it can include a statue.
Well, Jeff has just pointed out, rightly so, that the park's concept has expanded, but it is still...
No. The park's participation has expanded. The concept in the legislation has not.
Well, let me clarify.
Let me clarify. It happened in the 1860s.
Let me clarify for a second, because it is Stone Mountain, the private sector manager of Stone Mountain Park, is my client, and it has expanded in both ways, both in demography, obviously, and also in the mission of the park. I mean, if you go out there now, you'll hear about the African American who built the covered bridge. You'll hear Andy Young talk about a narrative, and this is on an app that you can download. You'll hear about Andy Young talking about...
But you also have to hear about those three Confederate leaders and put it all inclusive in our history. That's history.
We got to get out.
That's great.
This argument is going to be with us for a long time. time. In fact, we might even
without
resume
representation.
it when we return. But for now, let's go see if Fox 5 can make some money. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
And here I'd wrapped everyone up on the monument question, but I'm going to break my word in a sense. I'm curious, Alexis, Stone Mountain is one thing. I don't think that's governed by state law, as Phil points out.
Yes.
And as Jeff points out, there are a lot of people who like it just the way it is and enjoy the beauty of the park.
I don't think that they like it the way it is, but they
there
accept
are
what it is.
Roughly 1,500 monuments throughout the South toward Confederate veterans. There are like, what, several hundred schools named after Confederate veterans, that sort of thing. Put yourself in a medium-sized city, a county courthouse, county seat in Georgia, where everywhere there is a statue of a Confederate war veteran. Should that come down?
Well, if they don't want to take them down because of the expense, they should put something up to put them in context, or some other tributes of some
that's fair
sort.
enough.
I think it is a problem. I think they ought to be removed from public spaces, because public funds are supporting this celebration of the Confederacy, and the ones that were put up, they weren't put up during the Confederacy. They were put up in the beginning of the 20th century.
I think if we're going to have a democratic process here, you should have localities in the state doing it. And by the way, state law protects all monuments.
Right, it does.
It protects all monuments. You know, I mean, it's an interesting discussion, and I think that the
But we're not going to be like Baltimore.
I'm glad that, I'm sorry?
We're not going to be like Baltimore, where they took the statues down in the dark of night.
Well, we are like Baltimore. If you want to talk about Piedmont Park, that was an outrage.
We're going to in a minute. Yeah, we're going to in a minute.
It wasn't a city that did it. Okay.
Well, you know what I was, you know, Jack and Warren Christian, the great-great-grandchildren of Stonewall Jackson, had this wonderful piece in Slate where they said, we're not ashamed of our great-great-grandfather, we're ashamed to benefit from white supremacy while our black family and friends suffer. We're ashamed of the monument. And I think that those are the kinds of words that need to help push our nation forward. These are people who have had to live in a very personal way with this legacy their entire lives. And if you look at those descendants, direct descendants of Civil War generals, they have a very different view of all of this than the rest of us. And they will agree with the Alexis and say that these things belong in a museum.
Well, that's one side of the coin, and that's the other side of the coin is there's a lot of people that still honor their veterans and Confederate history. You know what's sad is there's a beautiful Confederate cemetery in Marietta. They've gotten threats for desecration of the graves. Now that is sick, warped, left-wing propaganda.
No, let's bring it home. Let's bring it home.
Sickness, but
we had a bunch of crazies last weekend go into Atlanta and try to take down the peace statue for the Civil War.
It was a mistake. Right?
Well, they got the wrong statue, I guess, and they ripped the olive branch.
Well, let's set the stage
out of
for
the veterans.
viewers.
And the crowd was unimpeded by the police.
Well,
Phil.
this is the outrage of what happened last Sunday. A group of a lot of them are anarchists and communists, as identified by the Atlanta Police Department. They led an unpermitted march down Peachtree to the Piedmont Park. And then they defaced the statue. The chief, Erica Shields, to her shame, told the police to stand down. The police union is livid, from what my research indicates. And no one was arrested. As we tape, no one has been arrested.
To her credit, she went on another station, and she admitted that she was wrong. And that
there should have been arrest. She said, oh, there should have been arrest. What a stupid statement to make afterwards.
No, it's not.
I don't think it was stupid.
I think it shows
refreshing that she admitted her mistake.
Well, everyone was pressuring her. Everyone was pressuring her.
her.
We saw the tapes.
Well,
you know, I have to tell you that I am moved when I see these young white folks out protesting these statues, whether it's in Piedmont Park
with
or in Charlottesville,
flags and with all of this,
or the vigil, for instance, in Charlottesville afterward. You look at that crowd of people holding these candles, and I would imagine that at least 80 or 90% of them are white. Right, and you juxtapose that from the lynch mobs of a century ago, or the Bull Connor water hoses of just a few decades ago.
Being destroyed?
And I think that what you see is people who are embarrassed by tributes on public display to treason and to white supremacy. And they have a problem with that. These are young white Americans. And I think that they're going to come down, Phil.
You know,
they may not come down in your day.
You know what?
They may not come down in Donald Trump's day, who thinks they're beautiful.
Can I make
but
a point?
They're coming down.
Can I make a point?
Yeah.
We need to have a history lesson again, because there's so much garbage that's being taught in our high schools and colleges. You know, after the Civil War, there was reconciliation. That was what the Peace Monument was all about.
That's exactly
in
right.
fact, Confederate veterans were made.
And then what happened after the
federal law, they're
Reconstruction and
U.S.
Reconciliation? What happened
citizens.
after that? Came the redemption of the South
know
by
what,
the
Rob,
white Southerners who put up these
I'm going to give a
monuments
history
to their
lesson. I'm going to give a history lesson very quickly. Robert E. Lee was asked by his soldiers and officers, let's go into the mountains and wage guerrilla war against the federal government. He said, no, we need to reconcile. And a lot of these monuments are a reconciliation. Even in Arlington National Cemetery, Barack Obama, when he was president, sent a wreath over to the Confederate section of the cemetery. Why? Because it emphasizes the unity after the Civil War.
And that's the kind of leadership we need today, and we sorely lack.
Don't have it, right?
Well, we're out of time here. I did want to mention that poor Gwinnett magistrate judge, Jim Hinkle,
Oh, yeah.
who said on Facebook what probably 70% of Georgians would say on the topic, and lost his job over it.
Judges better not use social media.
70% of Georgians not being judges and in a position, right?
Saying whatever they want to say, right?
Anyone in public office probably better be real careful of their
And the last thing on this
Facebook.
topic, I couldn't believe Peter Raymond, in his campaign for mayor, wants to rename Confederate Avenue, and I think Kasim Reed's going to do it.
Oh yeah,
We're erasing history.
Well, that's
the
the
Confederate.
I don't think that a
Erasing history.
renaming of
It's not
Confederate
erasing
Avenue is
history.
erasing history. It's just not. It's an acknowledgement of
That it's a
where
stupid
we are
name.
today.
All right, we
That's
gotta
all.
get it.
It's cultural barbarity.
It's one of
Thank you.
the quotes that Maynard Jackson used to say all the time. New occasions teach new duties. Time makes ancient good uncouth. And that's a 19th century quote.
Maybe we'll rename Maynard
Englishman.
Jackson's thing in about 50 years.
Absolutely.
Well, maybe we get his name off the airport, huh? Well, you don't know. What you
perhaps
reap what you
Gonzalez
sow.
will be added
You
to
reap
it.
what you sow. All right, when we come back, I have no idea. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Just a quick word on infrastructure before we turn to the politics of Washington, D.C. The Mercedes-Benz Stadium Saturday was open to its season ticket holders, and apparently a
Got
big
an
deal.
opportunity to look at
And you
that?
said the first game is August 26th?
The sixth.
No, they're
This
earlier
one
than
opens.
that. Wait a minute.
This
There
one
no,
opens.
but there are Atlanta
Events
United
before that.
games way before
Right.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, early September.
I'm excited
Now,
about that.
Jeff is going over tomorrow to tour, and I've asked him to push the button to see if the roof will open. So give us a report.
We'll have a report
Where's
next
that
week.
elevator?
And we should also note that that late ad of Fulton County, the discussion of the new Phillips Arena, here we are on these big projects again.
Right.
It looks like there'll just be a restructuring of funds, of loans, no cash. And Kasim Reed, the mayor, opened the Proctor Creek Greenway this week.
Super
Is that part of the? It looks
Super news, an extension of and a connection.
I
to
like
the
it
Beltline.
because we get some use out of the river. That's a resource we've never really used
it's
in Atlanta,
terrific.
in the
Yes.
city.
Yes.
And I think that's a good. It's not connected to the Beltline though, is it?
It is connected to the Beltline. It's not part of the Beltline, but it connects to the Beltline.
Okay. Now in Washington, Phil, Johnny Isakson, I think he deserves some credit. The guy's been working through the hard years of Obama, and now out of the limelight because the president takes it all. Yet he did get his Veterans Bill, reform bill, signed into law by the President Donald Trump.
He did, and I tell you, this is a rare case of bipartisanship. Senator Isakson deserves a lot of credit. He was the point man. He worked with some leading Democrats, and President Trump got on the phone and put his full support behind it. So we talk a lot about division, but this was a true case, and hats off to the
On
senator.
the other side of the coin, you've got David Perdue, the other senator, Tom Cotton of Arkansas, who with Trump presented a really interesting immigration bill. And because of all this other hoorah, it's going nowhere. You don't hear it discussed anywhere, do you?
I don't agree
And
with you.
you're
that
my
it's-
immigration expert.
I don't agree with you that it's going nowhere. It's going to be part of the discussion of all the big bills. You know how both sides always try to put in things
Yeah.
when you get the big bills.
I also
And
think-
basically what it is to protect the American worker from too much foreign worker competition. That's something Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump agreed on, by the way.
But I think it is maybe well-intentioned, but I don't think it's going to hit the mark, because even I heard a conservative analyst say that it limits the education, and they don't need to do that.
It's it's to bring in high-skilled workers.
Yes,
I think is what he was talking about. We're finally going to have.
But why would you limit that?
Well, because we don't want uneducated, unskilled workers.
No, but I mean, why would you limit the number that you could bring in if you need them, if you can't find them here?
You still have visa categories that if no American citizen takes a job, then a foreign worker can.
One last thought about these issues that are getting lost. I mean, look, this was a convulsive week. The press is embarrassing. On the CBS Evening News devotes all 30 minutes to a press conference by Donald Trump. They've lost all reason and perspective.
And they don't mention North Korea or anything else.
The awful terrorism in Barcelona was almost a relief for those who watch news on television.
Oh, good. That kind of terrorism is never
an awful thing. You hate to look at it that way. But let's remember, the week began with Donald Trump trying to present an infrastructure bill. That was a key part of his campaign.
But that's the thing.
That's completely lost.
Well, he blows up his own stuff himself.
Donald Trump misdirects the focus, right, of the media.
It was a press conference.
And the Congress and everywhere else. And that's why he can't get anything done.
Well, you know what? You do answer the questions at a press conference, and even the liberal media always
cut him off at some point.
Criticize Barack Obama for not holding news conferences or answering. But this happens. This is now the 24/7 news cycle. We all know this. And sad to say, you talk about eclipsing. These other stories are eclipsed by the newer stories that are then eclipsed by the other stories that come.
And they're all precipitated by his endless
Well, they're not all precipitated. World events has a lot to do with it.
We're out of time. We'll come back and we will visit winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And remember to join us on Facebook, The Georgia Gang. And of course, your emails are always welcome. And I'll begin winners and losers with you, Jeffrey.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to start with a loser, and that's got to be Donald Trump. I mean, he had probably one of the worst weeks of a very troubled presidency with the defection of, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 or a dozen CEOs and executives around the nation who didn't want their reputations, their brands associated with the President of the United States.
They don't even want to be associated with America.
It's a startling thing. It's an amazing thing. Bob Corker coming out saying, I don't know that this person has what it takes to lead this nation and be President of the United States. And so it's got to be a terrible day for him. Winners, winners are those CEOs who disassociated themselves very rightly. And my friend Tom Houck, who is going to be celebrating his 70th birthday. And it's going to have of course, he's going to have a huge birthday party. 70 years old.
Former Georgia Gang member.
Former Georgia Gang. An original Georgia Gang member. Exactly right.
All right, Alexis.
Okay, I'm going to salute the Atlanta Braves. They are having their Hank Aaron Heritage Weekend this weekend, and part of that was a conversation with Hank Aaron and sports artist Joseph Brannon, who let me make sure I don't say his name wrong. Joseph Brown, who is an art professor at the University of Georgia. They had a conversation moderated by Doug Shipman as part of Clark Atlanta University's 30th anniversary kickoff celebration.
Oh, so they're also giving away miniature Hank Aaron statues at the ballpark.
Right, and also...
And they're having MC Hammer in concert.
Isn't that something?
Is he still alive? And that's amazing.
He's still performing, right? And then also they had another conversation at the Center for Civil and Human Rights, too, presenting awards in his name. And finally, Cesar Mitchell got the endorsement of Andy Young and C.T. Vivian to go along with that of Joseph Lowry. So he's got
like
the
we say,
civil rights
qualifying is this coming week for the mayor's races. All right, Phil.
Well, I'm going to make Donald Trump the winner because he and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, you can laugh at this if you want to, Defense Secretary Mattis, they backed down this nut in North Korea who was threatening the United States. And I don't think North Korea cares who they hit, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. And I think some tough talk was needed after about 25 years of bipartisan softness. Secondly, I want to make as my winner Major Timothy Peake of the Atlanta Police Department. He was foolishly sent in, but he did his job to that Piedmont Park mob, and he stood there and had to take all sorts of personal abuse. The police union tells me there was no backup. He calmed down the crowd as best he could, along with some sincere people who were there, because the left-wing radicals were threatening his life. So what a hero he is. And let me just finish my winners and losers, because I want to just say this about the police not making any arrests. I make the loser the mayor, Kasim Reed, and the chief, Erica Shields. Okay, she admits later that she should need to redo this and have some arrests, but you cannot have the rule of law undermined like that. I would hope we would all agree on that.
Well, I hope you're right about Donald Trump and North Korea.
Yeah,
it's bold to make him the winner.
I hope I'm right too.
Oh no, I really do hope you're right. But that got lost in the tumultuous events of the week. And I'll stay local. Remember the old Constitution building? It's been vacant over the Railroad Gulch. I never worked. That's so old. I didn't ever work in that building. You didn't either. And it sat there as an eyesore for years. And now finally, I guess somebody's going to renovate it, and get some public funds to do so. Normally, I don't like that public funding idea, but that thing's got to go. And congratulations to Dale Russell of the I-Team at Fox 5. When you get the mayor of a city wearing a bra in a nude dancing club, you've had a good week in the news business.
Whoa.
And that was the mayor of Forest Park, Dale Russell. He'll tell you that it's my job, but he had fun. All right, we'll see you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.